That was essentially Creighton Waters talking about how Alec Murdaugh, when he was on the stand, presented a different idea as to why these murders happened. He believes that the real killer or killers are still out there. This is something that his brother John Marvin also testified to when he was on the stand. He said that he believes that SLED did not do a good enough job in trying to find the real killer. The real killer's out there. He said he was incensed, really, when he realized that there was a release that had come out a few days after the murders that talked about there's no danger to the public. And this is sort of, speaks to one of the defense's arguments, which is that, Alec Murdaugh was essentially singled out as a suspect from the start to the exclusion of other suspects. But Creighton Waters, in that soundbite that you just heard, was saying that, yes, okay, Alec may have presented forth, put forth this idea of why the murders happened, but there's no direct evidence to that. There's no evidence that someone was inflamed about the, what they heard about the boat wreck and was essentially driven to act on it. As he said that there were half-truths in the media and misrepresentations that made Paul out to be someone that he wasn't, and so it was that person who killed Maggie and Paul. Creighton Waters also talked at length about some of the theories that the defense had and said that they weren't viable. So Judy and Greg, one thing that he touched on was this idea of, the defense talked about 5'2" vigilantes that came to the kennels during the select time period where Alec was not there and committed these murders, trying to point out what he believes is an unreasonable theory, an unreasonable assertion for jurors here. Judy and Greg?
Performance.
Oh, okay, right. So we will get back to Judy and Greg in just a minute. Apologies for that. But there's plenty more to cover here, to lay out for you. We're going to, talk about everything that we heard during closing arguments. A lot to sift through here. As they just wrapped up a few minutes ago, the defense is going to present their closing arguments early tomorrow morning. Of course, stay with WIS. We will be right back.
I know how much hate you must feel for me, but it isn't yours. The negative speed force has corrupted your mind.
Hello?
Iris, you don't have to do this. I need to know who you really are.
Whatever's going on, Vic.
West Shore Home is making shower and bath remodeling easy and more affordable for everyone. Hey everybody, I'm joined by Kirsten Page from West Shore to find out exactly how they're making that happen. Kirsten.
So Joe, we've been able to give homeowners, over 165,000 of them, the shower and bath of their dreams by making it a fast, easy, and convenient experience. But now we're making it even more affordable to start your project without breaking the bank.
Now Kirsten, when someone starts a remodeling project, costs can be a real concern. So how are you making it more affordable to start that project right now?
So instead of me telling you, why don't I show you? This homeowner was having some problems with their old shower. They called us, we stopped out, and we completely removed the old bathtub and replaced it with a walk-in shower in just one day. The best part? We can do a job like this for as low as $99 a month.
$99 a month, that's incredible.
It really is. We understand that budgets can be a little tighter this time of the year, so we want to make it easier for folks to get their projects started right now. So let's go ahead and look at another project we recently did. This homeowner was so excited to get rid of their old bathtub because they were getting an easy, low-step shower. You can see here we took out that old bathtub and removed everything down to the studs. Then we installed new walls and fixtures. By dinner time, this homeowner had their brand new shower, and the best part, they didn't need to worry about paying for their entire project up front. They were able to break it down into low monthly payments.
That project looks amazing, and the low monthly payments is going to make getting that project started so much easier. Kirsten, thanks so much. Folks, West Shore Home is making shower and bath remodeling fast and convenient, and you heard Kirsten, now they're making it more affordable too with their easy, low monthly payments. Call the number on your screen right now to start your project, and when you do, take advantage of this great offer. Call in now to get your new shower for as little as $99 a month. On top of that, they're doing free installation on all shower and bath projects. Don't delay. Call the experts at West Shore Home now.
What does it mean when I say call Shelly now?
It means if you're hurt in a car wreck, that you call Shelly now.
You call Shelly now.
She got me $275,000.
Call 803-567-5000 or go to callshellynow.com.
This is Alec Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child shot badly.
This is your wife and son?
Did I kill my wife? Just no, David.
It's just so bad. They did it so bad.
There's not one shred of evidence.
One question begets another, which begets another.
I go by Buster.
Do you have any idea who's done this?
Welcome back to our live team coverage in Colleton County. Judy Gatson along with Greg Adeline, our Nick Neville, and expert trial analysis from trial attorney Carl B. Grant. The prosecution has now wrapped up closing arguments. We are now getting closer to this case going to the jury. And Greg and Carl, as we were waiting during the break today, there has throughout this trial been a long line of people wanting to just have a seat in that courtroom to hear this testimony in person, to observe the jurors, to take a look at the attorneys, and of course Alec Murdaugh himself. I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of those people waiting in line today, but I have to tell you, I was surprised. There were people from North Myrtle Beach, from Charleston, from the upstate. People traveled to be here to observe what has been called the trial of the century, really, in South Carolina. Let's take a listen to what a couple of those observers had to say before they walked into the courtroom today.
I believe he did. I think he's guilty. I think it's been a long time coming for him, and whatever it was, he was there right before they were murdered. There's no people running around looking to kill her or the son.
So that was, again, just from one observer, purely her opinion. But Carl, she said that she thinks he's guilty, that she really touched on what Creighton Waters tried to push today, that he was the only one who we know was there and who had the opportunity.
Right. Well, I imagine the defense says we're glad she's not on the jury. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. You know, oftentimes people talk about circumstantial evidence and the fact that no guns have been found. That's a problem. No DNA. But I want to remind everyone that a person can be convicted of murder even if there's no body that's been found. Not just no guns, but if there's no body. If the circumstantial evidence proves the guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then the person can be convicted. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and some of the evidence that has been brought forward in this case, especially when it comes to the weapons, the firearms that were used, establishing that it was a Murdaugh family weapon that committed these murders, that it was a 300 blackout by tying some of the shell casings outside the gun room that were fired months prior to the casings next to Maggie Murdaugh's body. A powerful piece of evidence. While we might say it was one of these pieces that would stick with the jury, the closest thing that they have perhaps to direct evidence that it was fired from the same weapon. Very powerful. But I want to go back to talk about the motive in this case, because this was something that Creighton Waters hammered for a good portion of his closing argument this morning, talking about the financial firestorm that Alec Murdaugh was facing, the meeting at PMPED, Jeannie Seckinger coming to him saying that there's $792,000 in missing fees on June 7th, and also, of course, the pending boat case. June the 10th, there was going to be a hearing in the case involving the boat crash that killed Mallory Beach. Mark Tinsley, who was the lawyer for the Beach family, was going to have Alec Murdaugh open up those books. And prosecutors have hammered that, saying that it was this financial firestorm that caused Alec Murdaugh, and of course the death of his father that happened around that time. His father was gravely ill on June the 7th. They said that he was going into hospice care. Alec Murdaugh found that out during that meeting with PMPED, with Jeannie Seckinger. And so when it came to motive, Creighton Waters today, and I want you to hear this because we're going to play it for you in just moments, where he just talked about all of these circumstances that were building up, and then deftly pointed out, I think, to say that all of these circumstances really kind of vanished. We heard some of the testimony in this case. It was Jeannie Seckinger and it was Annette Griswold, who was the paralegal for Alec Murdaugh, who said that basically after June the 7th, after Paul and Maggie Murdaugh were killed, nobody talked about any of these missing fees anymore.
Right.
Mark Tinsley said that basically his case was gone at that point.
Right.
And so when it comes to those sympathies changing, Creighton Waters said that that was a very big factor. And it wasn't just that the sympathies changed momentarily. Alec Murdaugh, prosecutors say, likely thought that those sympathies, if he got away with this, they think, would have permanently changed. Take a listen.
In this car, just seconds after the supposed vigilantes, these vigilantes that apparently are 5'2", that knew somehow that Paul and Maggie would be both at Moselle on the evening of June 7th between 8:44 and 9:02, that also knew that they would be alone at this time. They knew that Alec would not be at these kennels. And they also knew the property well enough to get to the kennels. They also assumed that they would find ammunition and guns there, so they didn't bring those. And they traveled the same route as Alec after his short 20-second nap, and knew that he would be visiting his mother at Alameda during that time.
Compelling piece of audio there, especially when we talk about reasonable doubt.
Right.
Creighton Waters brought this out a couple of days ago, and it was in the direct questioning of Alec Murdaugh on the witness stand, just talking about really a ludicrous scenario in many ways, painting that for the jury. Let's get to Carl. As you heard that play out, how effective was that for him to be able to say, in order for Alec Murdaugh to not have done this, it would have had to be these 5'2" vigilantes. How powerful was that?
I thought that was very powerful. 5'2" is an unusual height, first and foremost. You can go a whole month without seeing a grown man who's 5'2" tall. That's a fact, all right? But, you know, I thought about this when it comes to the theory that they've been using for the financial crimes. A lot of people, lawyers included, have found that theory to be a hard pill to swallow. Now, I'm a trial lawyer who defends people, trial lawyer who does civil litigation. I've never been a prosecutor except in the JAG Court for a brief while. But if I was a prosecutor advising on this case, can you imagine if the theory of prosecution would have been that this initially was a murder-suicide gone bad? That Alex Murdaugh really intended to kill his family and himself because of the sad circumstances going on in his life at the time, but he just couldn't do it. And he tried to finish it off in September with cousin Eddie. That'd be a much more plausible pill to swallow.
Wow. And as you look at how they have walked this timeline with the jury today, Carl, it really was a timeline of the lies. And there were 2 points that I thought Creighton Waters made exceptionally well. When he talked about the reason Alec Murdaugh initially told them that he lied was because of his distrust with SLED. But Creighton Waters pointed out aptly that SLED wasn't even on the scene.
He wasn't even on the scene.
When he told his first lie.
Yes.
And then they played video after video after video where he lied easily to investigators about where he was that night. How compelling was that today in your mind?
All of that, all of the chain of lies that the prosecution has established, what they do is they chisel away at the foundation of the defendant's credibility. And you know, any kind of mountain, if you chisel enough, it's going to fall. A tree, you saw enough, it's going to fall. And you chisel at this defendant's credibility, and that's the most important thing at this point. Once he gets on that witness stand, once the defendant gets on the witness stand to testify, just like any other witness, he can be cross-examined, he can be impeached just like anybody else. Now the jury has to weigh him. The focus and the spotlight is on him. Is he telling the truth? He's under that hot spotlight. And that is why the defense counsel, I understand, did not want him to get on that stand. Because if he did, what if he falls and crumbles right before the jury's very eyes and tells another lie? And I think they can argue that he didn't.
Yeah, and in many ways, they sought to pinpoint some of those lies and also talked about many of the circumstances at Moselle. And the jurors were able to go to Moselle earlier on today. We want to take you there because these jurors headed out there And they weren't able to talk to each other or ask each other any questions there. They were only
Lawyers weren't able to talk to them.
That's
No
right.
demonstrations, no presentations.
Not at all. They were able to just kind of observe the scene, check out some of the dimensions, how far the kennels were from the home, and take a look and weigh that with some testimony that had come forward in this case. And so for them to kind of look through that scene and be able to process what had been talked about for 5.5 weeks, and then kind of put it together and then listen to this closing argument. We know that the prosecution didn't want the jury necessarily to head out there. The defense certainly did, but the prosecution might have been a little bit hesitant to have the jury head out there. But while they're able to make their case and make their closing argument right after jurors were on the scene, I think that may have played to their advantage in some ways. So they could put it together in their minds, especially one of those key little details that Creighton Waters laid out when he talked about how Alec Murdaugh might have been able to wash himself off at the kennels. I thought that that was something that we hadn't heard until today. And he put that in the jurors' minds. They were just at the kennels, and now to think that maybe that hose that was used there, Alec Murdaugh could have just washed himself off, had a change of clothes, and then took off.
Yeah, that might have answered a big question for the jury. When we come back with Carl, we're going to talk about what to expect possibly from the defense tomorrow. But our Nick Neville, he is here with us for our live team coverage in Walterboro as well. We want to check in with him for more insight and analysis about what was a very long but had a lot of key compelling moments today, Nick, in this final closing argument from the prosecution.
Yes, that's right, Judy. And one thing that I want to touch on here is really the key piece of evidence here in this case, which is that kennel video that all of y'all have touched on, which places Murdaugh at the scene of the crime. He, of course, lied about his presence at the kennels for months, and Creighton Waters played some of his interviews with investigators where he lies about being at the kennels just hours after the slayings. When investigators first arrive in that first interview with David Owen, he says that he was taking a nap after dinner, and then he went to go and visit his mom's house. Creighton Waters trying to establish that Murdaugh was trying to get an alibi together from the get-go. Also really working to outline for this jury some of the evidence, the forensic evidence that we've heard throughout this trial that really tightens the timeline for Murdaugh when he took the stand again last week, emphatically denying that he's the killer. He also came clean about that particular lie, and he talked about how it was a distrust of SLED that he had. He talked about paranoia related to his addiction. And again, that's something that the jurors are going to have to weigh, is the credibility of Murdaugh from the witness stand when he admits to lying about stealing money from clients and the law firm, stealing millions of dollars. He admits to lying about his whereabouts the night of the murders, but then says, but I am telling the truth when it comes to I did not commit these crimes. So that timeline tightens for him because that kennel video places him there at 8:45, and then just a few minutes later, prosecutors have cell phone data that shows that Maggie and Paul's phones go silent forever around 8:50. So Murdaugh says in what he told the jury during his testimony, he says that he was there around 8:45. He got a chicken out of the family dog Bubba's mouth, and then in his words, he got right out of there. He said he got right out of there basically as fast as he could. And he also talked about how he took a golf cart down there. Waters asked him during his testimony and then highlighted in closing arguments how he wasn't able to pinpoint his final conversation with his wife. You were just talking about that with Carl earlier, how you would remember some of these key moments, some of these traumatic moments, and Murdaugh said he wasn't sure what his final conversation was. He talked about when they were at dinner, what their final conversation was at dinner. He said he wasn't sure exactly what they were talking about. It may have been about Paul and some of the health issues that he was facing at that time. But he also asked him, he said, why, did you lie about that particular fact, and why did you say that you couldn't remember whether or not you said goodbye to your wife when you left the kennels? Because he said it was, the exact quote from him was, I would have said goodbye. So prosecutors are trying to assert that that shows a consciousness of guilt there. And so along Murdaugh's timeline here, he says that he's back on the golf cart. He goes back up to the main house. He takes a nap. Creighton Waters just in the last hour here as he finished up his closing arguments, called that the shortest nap in the history of the South. That was the nap where Alec Murdaugh was laying down after he got back to the main house around 8:50 and then went to his mom's home in Alameda. So prosecutors are really tightening that timeline for him and saying that it's just not reasonable. He was also talking about some of those theories from the defense. The defense brought up that they believe that based on the trajectory of the bullets, the shooter had to be around 5'2". The prosecution brought forth crime scene expert Ken Kinsey yesterday, and he did a demonstration with the Attorney General Alan Wilson. The first time we had heard from Alan Wilson, he was sitting at the prosecution table throughout this trial, but this was the first time he questioned a witness, and they went through a demonstration basically trying to knock down those assertions from the defense. Another assertion they tried to knock down was this idea that there were two shooters. But again, Creighton Waters multiple times trying to impress upon this jury that Murdaugh lied about, in Waters' words, what is the most important piece of evidence in this case. Take a listen to his what he told jurors about that critical moment.
Being at the scene of the crime when the murders occurred. Opportunity. And more importantly, exposing the defendant's lies about the most important thing he could have told law enforcement. When was the last time I saw my wife and child alive? Why in the world would an innocent, reasonable father and husband lie about that? And lie about it so early?
And Greg, so one of the things that Waters tried to impress upon this jury also is that circumstantial evidence, which is what the state is relying on here, is just as good as direct evidence, again, trying to assert that the evidence that they've compiled that places Murdaugh at the scene of the crime should lead to a guilty verdict. Judy and Greg?
Nick, that is such a fantastic point that you made there, because Creighton Waters mentioned that not only in his closing argument, but also in his opening statement, talking about circumstantial evidence, both times, interestingly, also referring to a storm or rain, saying you may not have seen the rain, but if you went out and saw that the sidewalk was wet, you see limbs down, you heard maybe rain hitting the roof, you can infer, based on the circumstantial evidence, that it rained outside. So that was a part of both of those presentations.
Yes.
Nick, very astute to be able to bring that out. Just one of the key components of Creighton Waters' presentation today, Judy.
I just got some photos from one of the people who was in the courtroom today as Alec Murdaugh left the courtroom a short time ago. We will share those with you. We'll have more insight from trial attorney Carl B. Grant as we talk about the prosecution's closing arguments here today, looking for the defense to start tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Our live team coverage of the Murdaugh murders continues here on WIS News 10.
Hey, Brett, I think we need a jingle.
What'd you have in mind?
I don't know yet.
Well, if you're thinking something, come knock on my door.
Come and knock on my door.
If you're 64.
Life isn't a whisper. It's a roar. It's about getting your hands dirty, taking risks that thrill, and planning the adventure that awaits the next day. Life is a precious, playful thing, which means it's our job